Here's my 1987 Marshall Silver Jubilee. And now you've heard a Fractal FM9 digital model of that same exact amp. If you didn't notice a big difference, don't worry, most people can. That's because digital modelers and amps are so absurdly close nowadays that comparing them really doesn't make sense anymore in 2026. They're both so good, it doesn't really matter. Instead, nowadays the interesting question is, what do you use when and in what kind of situation? Because depending on your personal situation, that answer might change completely. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Joey, professional guitar player, singer, songwriter, producer, and I've played amps for the past 25 years and modelers for the past 10 years, live in the studio at home. And over the years, I learned countless things about where each unit excels, where our amps best and where our modelers best. And in today's video, I'm going to share with you when to use an amp and when to use a modeler at home, live, and in the studio. So let's go. See, do you hear that? I think this is where a real amp still does something special, even when you use it at home. That saggy feel, that pick attack, the reaction to the volume knob, all these little complexities you're hearing in a real amp that sometimes get lost with a modeler. The make or break thing, though, to enjoy all these little luxuries, as I would call them, is whether or not you're in a situation at home where you can use a real cab. If you're able to use a real cab because there's no neighbors complaining and all that kind of stuff, then you're benefiting from a lot of things. The amp in the room kind of sound and feel, for instance, or the bottom end of a cab hitting you in the chest while you're playing, which is super inspiring. But it is important to understand that these things only come alive if you can use a cab. If you're running a setup like I'm doing right now to demonstrate this, which is I'm using my Marshall Silver Jubilee into a load box, and then we're using an IR, an impulse response, which is pretty much a cab simulation, and I'm hearing the entire guitar sound through my monitors right here, then all those benefits I just talked about, they're pretty much gone. Because at the end of the day, with this setup, you're still hearing a mic'd signal, just like you would with a modeler. And whether or not that source is analog or not, you're still pushing that analog source through lots of digital stuff, an impulse response, an interface, and it's coming out through, active monitors. All those little details and all those little benefits, they're gone away then. So if you're trying to decide whether or not you should use a real amp or a modeler at home because you're not sure, if you can use a cab, I'm all for it. I think you're way better off. There's a lot more fun involved. There's a lot more inspiration involved. If you can, and you have to go with an aux box or something like that anyway, then you're way better off with a modeler because you're way more flexible. And flexibility at home really is the other key word here. Because look at my situation, for instance. I'm creating content for you right now, and sometimes that means I need to be able to switch through different sounds just to show you something. And with a modeler, look at the screen here, I can just go, hey, this is my Marshall Silver Jubilee. I need a different sound, I just go to the amp section, say, all right, channel B, I need a Friedman Brown Eye. And then I'm going, wait, I need a stereo modulating tape delay. One click, here we go. And then I'm going, oh no, it's time for a clean sound, so let's just try and go ahead and take a Fender Princeton. See, there's no way you could just pull this off with a real amp, which just goes to show whether an amp makes more sense at home or a modeler really depends on if you can use a cab and if you need all the flexibility of a modeler. So if you can use a cab because your family is cool with it, your neighbors are totally cool with it, by all means, take an amp. It's so much more inspirational. But if you need the flexibility, if you're creating content, if you want to record easily, plug and play, a modeler is definitely the way to go. In a live situation, the decision between a digital modeler and a real amp is probably made by your ears, or precisely what's in it. Because the question, the make or break question here is the entire band using in-ear monitoring? Now, why is that? I would have loved to show you my in-ear monitors at this point, but I just crawled through this entire room trying to find them. I don't know where they are right now. It's a miracle to me. But the thing is, the way in-ear monitors work is they are built in a way that when you put it in your ear, they really isolate you from your environment. You can't hear pretty much anything when you use proper in-ear monitors, and you can only hear the stuff that comes out of that monitor into your ear. So that earpiece isolates you so much that if you had a cap on stage to feel the rumble, to feel, the sound beam, to get inspired, you wouldn't really hear it, which is why the benefits of using an actual cab with the real amp is totally diminished, because all you're hearing is a mic signal through a very small earpiece. And if that is the case, the benefits of an amp, they are just vanishing if that is the case. Plus, usually when the entire band you're joining uses in-ear monitoring, that usually means a silent stage or close to a silent stage is preferred, usually by the main singer. And if that is the case, a cab, and we have already established using a cab is the difference maker in using an amp, using a cab on a silent stage really isn't a thing. If everybody uses in-ears, you should use in-ears and you should use a modeler, because way less to carry, same signal for front of house engineer every single time. Nothing can break usually. A lot of advantages. Now, in stark contrast to that, if you're playing in a band where everybody brings the analog gear and everybody monitors themselves old school through wedges, and you have a super loud stage, you actually even need to play an amp, in my opinion and from my experience. Because in a world where everybody brings analog gear and cabs with 12-inch speakers, your modeling device that only feeds the front of house will not survive in that mix. It's just not enough air that is moving. It's not enough frequency range. In that situation, if you're only using a modeler straight into the front of house, you will go under in the mix. Nobody's going to hear you because all the mid-range that is pushing through the speakers, there's no way in the world you can make up for that, in my opinion. In that situation, you need an amp, otherwise you will just drown in the mix. Nowadays, what also works is a kind of hybrid approach where guitar players bring a digital modeling device and a full range frequency response speaker to make up for that missing guitar speaker that moves air. Also, what's good about that approach is your front row gets a little bit of a better guitar sound, because usually they don't stand in the beam of the PA, they're just in the front row, and having a full range frequency response cabinet definitely compensates for that. So when you're deciding what you need for a live gig, ask yourself this first. What kind of situation are you stepping into? If everybody is on in-ears and silent stages are preferred, go with a digital modeler. And if everybody brings their own amps and speakers, you should and need to bring yours as well. In the studio, the question whether or not you should use an amp or a modeler really depends on if you're using these kinds of sounds that you just heard, because the deciding factor in the studio is, what do you want to record? If it's heavily processed, if you're having time-based effects that need to map up with the tempo of the song, like if you have 130 BPMs and you have 130 BPMs delays and all these kinds of things, and you have pre-programmed these into your modeling device at home, then it's best to bring these sounds into the studio, because reproducing them with analog gear could take forever, and time is money in the studio. So the more sophisticated and the more processed your guitar sounds are, the better it is to use what you already came up with in the rehearsal room or at home with your modeling device or your plugin. The rule of thumb here is the more you have already locked in the sounds that you have in your demos and you want to use those exactly, don't try and reproduce that with analog gear. It takes forever. I tried it many times and it just does not end in a better result. Then you can just use what is in your demos or what you used already at home. The sonic benefits you would get from reproducing these kinds of sounds that you already did before in the studio with just analog gear is very minimal in a full mix. However, if the soundscaping part, the search for the best sound, if that is part of your process in the studio, part of the creative process in the studio, then by all means, go with analog gear, go with the real amp and the real cabinet. Why? Because it's way more intuitive. Check this out. I just made the point to you that I'm very flexible with this kind of surface here with my Fractal FM9, but look at all these knobs. When it comes to a creative process and you want to be, you want to go with your gut feeling and you want to be intuitive, look at this. The phaser alone in this software has 10 knobs. So it's easy to just get totally lost. It's not intuitive. It's not making the process faster. And it's not something where you get inspired easily by just turning 3 knobs and the sound is already right. In an analog setup, finding a nice sound with just a couple knobs is so much easier. Let's just say I have this bass tone here. And now I want an aerial kind of delay. Okay, I have a pedal in front of me. All right, that's not prominent enough. I just, turn one knob. There we go. Spheric, nice, anthemic. Very cool. I got a sound here. Oh, I need a little bit more of that octave on top. Super nice. Now it sounds like an organ. It's just so much more intuitive and so much easier to do that with analog gear. So if the soundscaping, if finding the best sounds is part of the journey and part of your process in your recording process, by all means, do it analog, because getting lost in digital menus when the time is taken in the studio is not a good thing to do. You lose all the fun, you lose all the motivation, you lose all the inspiration and that creative kind of flow that you need with the other musicians. So you need to be fast. Every session musician will tell you that, who's working in the studio all the time. In the studio, finding the right sounds, you want to be fast, you want to go with your gut feeling. And with menus, from a Fractal FM9, for instance, you can't do that. So by all means, go analog if that is part of the recording process. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, like, subscribe, click the bell icon, and check out my guitar course in the description down below, because I teach melodic soloing, power pentatonics, melodic riffing. I have a tone course for guitar tone specifically if you're into that. Check it out in the description down below. I've been Joey, and I'll see you in the next. Bye.